Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Helen. Hello, everyone.
Now, last week, local government reform continued to dominate with councils under pressure to demonstrate local consensus and evidence-based proposals as the government's feedback stressed collaboration and responsiveness to community needs. Whilst the APPG for Rural Business and the Rural Powerhouse has launched a call for evidence on how rural economies can thrive under devolution, including housing, skills, and economic growth. But we've got a range of other subject matters to plough through this week, I believe, Dennis. So what's up
Indeed,
first?
we have. Well, Helen, I want to start with procurement. Procurement of large multinational companies can be highly controversial. Geopolitical tensions, as they are termed, can impact upon the question of whether public bodies should be dealing with them. The first UK council to appoint the US technology company Palantir to deploy artificial intelligence into its systems is reviewing its contract after huge protests by workers and councillors over its links to the Israeli Defence Forces. The review of the £500,000 a year deal with the company was announced by Coventry City Council's Labour leadership on Tuesday, the 2nd of September. Now, Palantir is also involved in the US government's immigration crackdown and helps to manage data in the NHS.
Yeah, well, trade unions representing teachers and other workers protested against the contract outside a full council meeting when they were told by a deputy council leader, Abdul Khan, quote, "We are reviewing the Palantir contract. I will be supporting your concerns and agreeing with what you've said."
Now, it's interesting, the contract with the Colorado-based company started in February and followed a pilot scheme in the council's Children's Services Department, including using AI for case note transcription and to summarise social worker records. The council had said it was planning to extend the system and explore the transformative opportunities of artificial intelligence.
Well, the review was confirmed by the cabinet member for finance, Richard Brown, his name is, but he insisted that with the council losing 1.6 billion in spending power since 2010, he said, quote, "We simply cannot afford to stand still and do nothing." But cases like this, I think, raise a number of important legal contractual questions, Dennis.
Well, yes, I think so. How would you advise your council in responding to pressures like this? How would you advise on the legal position if it wishes to review or even pull out of a major IT contract because the service provider has commercial connections to Israel and the Gaza crisis or to some other global crisis? And would your answer differ if the UK government has legal objections to the actions being taken by a foreign government where the company has connections?
Well, in effect, Dennis, it's corporate morality. Is it a legal basis for refusing to select a bidder for a council contract? Yes, I potentially, or for withdrawing from a contract that's already been entered into. Some will say yes, some will say very firmly no. I think we'd really love to hear from our members in respect of this.
Yes.
Answers in the forum, please, but also we will be talking to our procurement national lead and looking to see whether we can do some sort of session on this, because I think it's really important and there's going to be huge consequences for the sector.
Yes.
So now,
indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's turn to Wales, and this is taken from our Welsh bulletin that comes out every 2 weeks. If you don't receive it, please get in contact because this is a brilliant resource. And actually, even if you're not based in Wales, it's good to keep an eye on what's going on there. So this is the news that an extra 30 million for community-based social care will help ease pressures on social care services and hospitals this winter. But councils in Wales are warning that ongoing sustainable investment is needed to ensure the availability of services to address rising demand, workforce shortages, and, of course, inflation.
The Welsh Government's funding will be shared among local authorities to strengthen community-based social care and speed up hospital discharges. Councils will use it to support timely assessments and secure care packages so people can leave hospital safely and receive support at home.
Well, in many areas, the investment will also help fund preventative work. That's the goal, such as multiple disciplinary teams that reduce avoidable hospital admissions and support people to remain independent for longer.
And the Welsh Local Government Association is calling for continued partnership working and a sustainable long-term funding plan to ensure that social care can keep pace with the growing needs of communities across Wales.
And let's turn now to the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales. Its report and accounts, that's an annual report, 24 to 25, shows a staggering 43% increase in the number of new complaints received since the year preceding the COVID-19 pandemic. And I should say that for housing associations, that figure rose 103%.
Yeah, it's staggering, isn't it? And the year 2024-25 marks another year of increasing caseloads, with more people than ever approaching the Ombudsman with complaints about public services. The office has intervened early in more cases and reduced the time taken to complete investigations. And the Ombudsman says it has also made strides in promoting improvements in public services through complaint standards work, own initiative investigations, and thematic reports.
I like that word, thematic. Despite challenges, however, public confidence in the Ombudsman itself is the highest on record, so well done to them. Now, in other news, when it comes to accounting, most lawyers, and I include myself, may well shy away from a deeper understanding. But in fact, it's more important than ever that lawyers take an interest and at least take the time to familiarise themselves with relevant guidance in the sector. Don't you agree, Dennis?
Well, I think that is absolutely spot on. Because business advice and accountancy firm Grant Thornton has issued a guide to local authorities on the use of finance instruments after finding gaps in their understanding of how these work. The firm said in a report entitled Local Authority Accounting, Avoiding Pitfalls in Financial Instruments, that many local authorities were using a wider range than before of different types of investments, loans to other parties and borrowings.
Well, it's critical that they fully understand the implications of the CIPFA Code of Practice on local authority accounting, Grant Thornton said. And where this was not understood, local authorities might enter into arrangements where they do not fully appreciate all of the implications, which could include consequences for their general fund.
Well, yes, precisely. And there were also risks that the accounting treatment may be incorrect, resulting in errors in their statements of accounts. Now, Grant Thornton said a fuller understanding of the requirements could improve the quality of local authority accounts, ensuring readers can understand the related risks of financial instruments and how to manage them.
Well, I think the report also illustrates with examples some of the common pitfalls to avoid with financial instrument disclosures and the statutory accounting requirements applicable to them.
So I suppose the question is, why does this matter to us? Well, the message, I think, is clear. Local government lawyers need to appreciate how various financial instruments operate where they are entered into by way of legal documentation, which of course will invariably be the case. And they must understand what their implications are and the legal impact they involve. And to use a paraphrase, no accountant is a lawyer, but some lawyers indeed need to be accountants.
Well, we've seen, haven't we, Dennis, criticisms of monitoring officers in failing authorities where the financial decisions have been at fault. And, a lot of people say that's completely unfair, but nevertheless, there you have it. That has been happening. So,
yes, I think that's right.
Yeah,
there has to be some level of understanding, a minimum threshold, if you like, that lawyers need to have available in their capabilities if they're working at the highest strategic levels in particular.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Now, in other news, the Renters' Rights Bill has now been considered by the Lords and amendments made. It's been sent back to Parliament and I believe was debated last week.
But perhaps let's take a step back here, Helen, and remind ourselves of how it all got to this point. The bill was considered by a Public Bill Committee over 8 sittings in October and November 2024. The government tabled 40 amendments to the bill, all of which were agreed. Opposition parties tabled 55 amendments to the bill, including 14 new clauses, none of which were agreed.
No. Well, the bill completed its remaining stages in the Commons back in January of this year. 47 government amendments, including 4 new clauses, were agreed at report stage. So there's been a lot of movement here.
Yeah.
Opposition parties also moved several more amendments, and 3 of which were pressed to a vote. No opposition amendments were made, however, to the bill.
Now, the House of Lords tabled a number of amendments, including a new possession ground 8A, which would allow a landlord to seek possession of their property where it was needed to house a carer for the landlord or for a member of the landlord's family. Another was to allow a landlord to require a pet deposit of up to 3 weeks, 3 weeks' rent as a condition for consenting to a tenant keeping a pet in the property. Another amendment was to reduce from 12 months to 6 months the restricted period during which landlords cannot re-let their property after using possession to sell it. Another amendment required local authorities to meet the criminal rather than civil standard of proof when imposing financial penalties for breaches of the rental discrimination and rental bidding requirements. Finally, an amendment was suggested to extend the decent home standard to Ministry of Defence service family accommodation.
Well, of course, that's been in the news quite a lot, actually,
Yes.
the standard of accommodation for the military. Well, as I said last week, the Commons debated the Lords' tabled amendments. This was led by Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook. And then quite a few of the Lords' amendments were overturned, including the proposal requiring tenants to pay a 3-week pet deposit if they wish to keep a pet. If you're already trying to get a deposit together anyhow, that would actually be quite a stretch for a lot of people that then may find themselves having to give up their pet. So I can see why the government potentially wasn't keen for that. They also overturned a change allowing backdated rent increases only after tribunal decisions. This was reversed to allow backdating from the notice expiry date, and amendments affecting student accommodation and military housing. So they didn't get through, which the government argued would undermine consistency and fairness.
Yes, and one notable change by the Lords that did survive allows local authorities to inspect properties without prior notice to landlords in certain circumstances. And this aligns with powers already used in selective licensing schemes and could significantly impact enforcement capacity.
Well, it's certainly going to make it easier, isn't it, for local authorities in certain situations. So that bill's now going to have to go back to the Lords. And then we'll see whether there's agreement or whether we're in a period of ping pong. Let's see.
Yes.
Now, in completely different news, and something I don't believe we've ever covered before in the Grapevine, Dennis, allotments.
No, indeed. And, local authorities are always being pressed to get spades into the ground. So here's a good news story, especially for local authorities in northeast England, from where I speak to you right now. The northeast of England is Great Britain's allotment heartland, with Redcar and Cleveland and County Durham being the 2 councils with the highest rate of allotment provision per person an analysis has found. Allotment provision across the whole country is wildly mixed, the analysis shows. Some areas have nearly 9 square metres per resident, while Londoners do worst of all, with Kensington and Chelsea and the City of London, the 2 councils tying for the bottom spot. Modern allotments date to the early Victorian era, although their origins can be traced to Anglo-Saxon times and enclosures in medieval England.
You've got to love the history of that. Well, Britain's allotment peak came during and between the World Wars, where they helped, of course, to feed the nation. 2/3 of allotment land has been lost since then, much of it, of course, built upon, reflecting a post-war decline in interest. However, in recent decades, allotments have grown in popularity, particularly during the COVID crisis, when the UK's estimated 330,000 plots were, in fact, a lifeline for many as a form of permitted exercise.
Indeed. The Guardian's recent analysis compared land classed by the Ordnance Survey as allotments and communal growing space in the 350 local authorities in Great Britain and divided the amount of allotment space in square metres by the population in order to provide an allotment rate per person to establish like-for-like comparisons between areas. On the basis of this, Redcar and Cleveland and County Durham came top, as I mentioned. The Isles of Scilly, which has the smallest population of any of the local authorities, came third. The rest of the top 50 local authorities range from North Norfolk in fourth place to 50th placed Westmorland and Furness.
Well, joint bottom of the 350 local authorities, as we touched upon, is Kensington and Chelsea, which does not have a single allotment site. The City of London also has no allotments, although it is a lot smaller than most local authorities in terms of geographical area population. London hosts 14 of the bottom 50 ranked councils, nearly all of which are in inner London. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. The only two inner London councils to escape the group are Lewisham and Greenwich, coming in at positions 291 and 294 in the rankings, respectively.
But here are a few questions about all of this. What sort of legal issues do allotments give rise to? And second, is the government's dash for housing growth putting development pressure on allotments in your area? And what safeguards do you consider necessary? Answers, please, once again, to the LLG forum page. Now, I'm sure all our members will be pleased that I've been digging into all of this, Helen. Well done, Durham and Redcar. You clearly came up roses.
Oh dear. I mean, this might be reflective, these numbers, of the fact that there's a distinction, isn't there, in areas between whether or not there's a statutory mandatory requirement to provide allotments. I don't know whether the government should look at that, but it's unlikely given their drive for new builds and their targets for new housing. So, but an allotment is a rather lovely thing, I think.
Indeed it is.
Now let's move swiftly on. The Centre for Governance and Scrutiny have been taking a look at the role of scrutiny in light of local government reorganisation. And its detailed 5-point action plan with guidance is on its website. The Centre is arguing that scrutiny is well placed to understand the Council's fundamental objectives with regards to local government reorganisation, understand its position, its aims, its assumptions, to develop a baseline understanding of the picture and, where necessary, to inform scrutiny's thinking on where further work might be needed to flesh plans and objectives out in advance of the establishment of the shadow authority.
That's right, Helen. The Centre also advised that scrutiny members should familiarise themselves with the issues involved, plan their future involvement indeed. Time spent planning and reflecting does pay dividends, not least because the remainder of the process will be fast-paced and time and capacity will be tight.
And scrutiny should understand the nature of local disagreements and where they exist because, as the Centre highlights, tension and disagreement is an almost inevitable part of the early part of the LGR process. And if it continues, there's a real risk that it can affect the capacity of sovereign authorities to make and deploy the plans they need in order for LGR to be a success.
And on a slightly different note, the Centre has also published their annual scrutiny survey for England for the year 2024-25, which reveals that only 1/3 of scrutiny chairs or vice chairs are female, whilst black and ethnic minority chairs account for 12%, demonstrating underrepresentation in the sector.
Well, overall, Dennis, more people think scrutiny isn't working well than think it's working extremely well. And only 7% who responded to the survey thinks it's effective. 8% of respondents felt that scrutiny was positively impacting the lives of local people. So that's an incredibly low figure. Perhaps, Dennis, LGR represents an opportunity for local authorities to reset the position of scrutiny within their own governance framework, I wonder. And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 30, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Goodbye now.